For over 4 decades, the death of Natalie Wood has haunted Hollywood like a shadow that refuses to fade. The official story was tragic enough. A beloved actress, one of the brightest stars of her generation, found floating face down in the dark waters off Catalina Island. The night was November 29, 1981. She was 43 years old. The cause of death, drowning, the details, murky, the circumstances, suspicious from the very beginning. She had been aboard the yacht Splendor with her husband Robert Wagner, actor Christopher Walken, and the ship's captain Dennis Davern. What started as a calm evening soon spiraled into an alcohol-fueled nightmare. And by the next morning, Natalie was gone. The official verdict? Accidental drowning. But no one really believed it. Not then. Not now. And now, after decades of silence, retracted statements, reopened investigations, and long-whispered rumors, the mystery appears to be finally unraveling. And the truth that's coming to light? It isn't good. In fact, it's darker than anyone imagined. New testimony. A change in the official cause of death. And a quiet but damning shift in how investigators now view Robert Wagner. After years of denial, we may finally be looking at what really happened that night, and why justice has never been fully served. In this deep dive, we uncover the real story behind Natalie Wood's final hours, and the chilling truth that's been hiding in plain sight. Before the mystery, before the tragedy, and before the whispers of foul play, there was a love story, glamorous, dramatic, and almost too perfect to be real. Natalie Wood was Hollywood royalty long before she ever met Robert Wagner. She was just 8 years old when she stole the world's heart in Miracle on 34th Street. And by the time she was a teenager, she was a rising star with an Oscar nomination and a string of blockbusters under her belt. But behind the smile was a child who had grown up fast, too fast. Natalie had been pushed into fame by a domineering mother and raised under studio lights instead of sunlight, and that early trauma never really left her. Enter Robert Wagner, handsome, polished, the kind of man studio heads loved to cast as the clean-cut romantic lead. Natalie had idolized him as a teenager, even telling friends she would marry him someday. And in 1957, at just 19 years old, she did. To the world, they were picture perfect. Natalie, the delicate starlet. Robert, the dashing gentleman. Hollywood's golden couple. But off-screen, cracks formed early. Wagner was charming but controlling. And Natalie, though in love, was already struggling with the shadows of her childhood and the suffocating expectations of fame. Their first marriage collapsed in 1962. Publicly, they cited career pressures. Privately, Natalie was said to be devastated after discovering Wagner in what one biographer described as a compromising situation with another man. The rumor, never confirmed, was one of many secrets that haunted their relationship. And yet, in a twist stranger than fiction, they reunited nearly a decade later. In 1972, they remarried, and Hollywood applauded the mature love story. Two stars, older and wiser, ready for a second chance. But time hadn't healed the wounds. It had only buried them deeper. Friends and insiders say the second marriage was even more complicated than the first. Natalie had grown more confident, more independent, but Wagner hadn't changed much. He remained deeply jealous, especially of her male co-stars, and intensely protective of their public image. Christopher Walken, her brainstorm co-star, had allegedly become a point of tension between them. Walken was young, charismatic, and enigmatic, and Wagner didn't like the chemistry he saw brewing between them on set. As Natalie's career reignited in the early 1980s, her marriage began to fray again, slowly, quietly. Behind the carefully posed photos and scripted interviews, Natalie had started confiding in friends that she felt trapped again, just as she had in her youth. She feared the water, had since she was a child, and she feared being alone with Wagner when things got heated, when alcohol entered the picture, when the charm faded and the temper appeared. She once told a close friend, "Robert is not who the public thinks he is." But even in her most vulnerable moments, she never completely broke away. That's the thing about Natalie. She had spent her life performing, even when no one was watching. And she believed in preserving the fairy tale, even if it meant hiding the truth. The night of November 28, 1981, was supposed to be a getaway. A calm evening on the yacht Splendor, anchored near Catalina Island. Just the two of them, Walken and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern. But what started as wine and laughter quickly turned sour. Tensions boiled over. There were arguments, loud ones. Witnesses on a nearby boat claimed to hear a woman screaming, "Help me!" someone said, but the cries were dismissed. The next morning, Natalie's body was found floating a mile from the yacht. She was wearing a flannel nightgown, red down jacket, and socks. The dinghy was missing, later found beached nearby. The original autopsy called it an accidental drowning, but even then the story didn't add up. Natalie was terrified of dark water. Why would she leave the yacht alone, in the middle of the night? And why were there bruises on her arms, a scrape on her cheek, and unexplained injuries to her legs? These weren't questions that the public asked right away. Hollywood was grieving. Robert Wagner was devastated in front of the cameras. And for a time, the tragedy was allowed to remain just that, a tragedy. But the truth, as it often does, refused to stay buried. For decades, Dennis Davin kept his mouth shut. As the captain of the Splendor, he had witnessed one of the most mysterious nights in Hollywood history. But in the early days following Natalie Wood's death, he said what he was told to say. The official story was simple. Natalie had gone to bed early, alone, while Wagner and Walken remained topside. At some point, she tried to secure a dinghy that had come loose and accidentally slipped into the cold Pacific waters. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. Davin backed it. Wagner backed it. The case was closed, but not everyone believed it. The inconsistencies were there from the start. Natalie's fear of water was well known, almost pathological. Friends and family had long described how she would never set foot in the ocean, let alone step into a small boat alone at night. And then there were the injuries on her body, fresh bruises on her arms and legs, a facial abrasion, and superficial trauma inconsistent with a simple drowning. But back in 1981, the Los Angeles County coroner ruled the cause of death as accidental drowning, and that was enough to bury the truth for a while. In 2011, 3 decades after that fateful night, everything began to unravel. For the first time, Dennis Davin came forward and said he had lied. Not just omitted the truth, lied. In a chilling interview with NBC's Today Show, he stated that Robert Wagner had waited hours before calling the Coast Guard. And worse, he insinuated that an argument between Wagner and Wood had escalated violently just before she vanished. "I made mistakes by not telling the honest truth in a police report," Davin admitted. "I was told what to say." His account sent shockwaves through Hollywood and reignited the investigation. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reopened the case and officially reclassified Natalie's cause of death from accidental to drowning and other undetermined factors. Quiet but powerful change, and a clear signal that the truth had yet to surface. The most damning part of Davin's new story wasn't just the suggestion of foul play, it was the silence he described afterward. According to Davin, Natalie and Wagner had been arguing fiercely that night, primarily over Walken. Wagner had allegedly accused Natalie of flirting with him and possibly having an affair. Davin claimed he heard furniture being thrown, shouting, and finally, a deadly silence. Minutes later, Natalie was gone, and no one called for help, not for hours. Davin's sudden transparency placed new pressure on Wagner, who refused to speak publicly in detail about the night. His only consistent statement was that it was a tragic accident, but investigators were no longer convinced. In 2018, Wagner was officially named a person of interest in the case, a stunning development that suggested law enforcement was inching closer to naming him as more than a grieving husband. But there was a problem. Time. Nearly 40 years had passed. Key witnesses were gone. Evidence was lost or never properly collected. And Wagner, now in his 80s, was protected not just by time, but by decades of silence from those who had once stood by him. Still, the new wave of scrutiny couldn't be ignored. Multiple forensic experts revisited the autopsy report, noting that some of Natalie's bruises were consistent with an assault, not a fall. And Davin wasn't the only one with doubts. Natalie's sister, Lana Wood, had long believed Robert Wagner wasn't telling the truth. "He knows more than he's ever admitted," she said. "He's hiding something." The public, too, began asking louder questions. Why wasn't Wagner more forthcoming? Why was Davin told to lie? Why did it take so long for the story to change? The more people looked, the more the original narrative crumbled. It didn't look like an accident anymore. It looked like a cover-up. And through it all, Robert Wagner never faced charges. Never sat for cross-examination. Never offered new details. He remarried, continued working, and moved on. But Natalie's legacy didn't. The mystery still hung in the air, growing heavier with every year of silence. And now, with key players finally breaking ranks, the truth that's emerging isn't the one Hollywood wanted, but it may be the one Natalie deserves. In 2012, suddenly, the simple narrative of a tragic accident was no longer sustainable. These weren't bruises consistent with slipping off a boat. They were consistent with an altercation. Dr. Lakshmanan Satyavagiswaran, the legendary LA coroner who re-reviewed the findings, admitted that the injuries raised significant questions. The location of the bruises, the pattern, they suggest more than just a fall, he said. It was the first official acknowledgement from a forensic expert that Natalie Wood might not have fallen into the ocean by accident. And with that admission, the investigation was effectively reopened, again. By 2018, detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department had re-interviewed more than 100 witnesses. Some who had remained silent in 1981 now felt compelled to come forward. They spoke of hearing screams from the yacht that night, of seeing suspicious behavior, of being discouraged from going public. Some even claimed they had been warned by Wagner's legal team to let the past stay buried. But the past was refusing to stay down. That same year, investigators officially named Robert Wagner as a person of interest. For the first time, they publicly said that Wagner's account just didn't add up. In a televised statement, Lieutenant John Corina said, "He's the last person who was with her before she went into the water. We want to know what happened in those final minutes. His version of events has changed over the years, and we have concerns." The words were careful, measured, but the message was clear. They no longer believed the man who had once been portrayed as a heartbroken widower. Wagner, for his part, refused to cooperate with the renewed investigation. He declined all interview requests from detectives. His representatives insisted he had said everything there was to say, and that the case had been closed decades ago. But the silence spoke volumes. Why wouldn't he help clear things up? Why refuse to answer questions, if he had nothing to hide? More forensic experts began analyzing the evidence. Even in the absence of new DNA or surveillance footage, things that didn't exist in 1981, the puzzle was being reconstructed with chilling precision. Specialists reviewed the position of the body, the angle of the bruises, and the condition of the dinghy where Natalie was allegedly trying to flee. Several concluded that the injuries were more likely sustained during a physical struggle, not a fall. And if that were true, then the last person to see Natalie alive wasn't just a witness. He was possibly much more. Public interest reignited. Documentaries were released, and podcasts devoted entire seasons to dissecting the mystery. And the more people examined the timeline, the more disturbing it became. Why did Wagner wait over 4 hours before contacting the Coast Guard after realizing Natalie was missing? Why was her jacket soaking wet, if she had only fallen in moments before being found? Why had Walken too remained so tight-lipped all these years? The more investigators dug, the more the official story collapsed under the weight of its contradictions. And yet, no charges were filed. The case technically remains open but inactive. A case caught between the limitations of time and the powerful reach of legacy. But even without a trial, the truth is becoming harder to ignore. With forensic evidence contradicting Wagner's account and law enforcement quietly indicating their suspicions, the public's faith in the original story has all but evaporated. Natalie Wood didn't just drown. Something happened on that yacht, and the closer we get to the truth, the clearer it becomes. Someone on board that night knows exactly what it was. More than 4 decades have passed since Natalie Wood's body was pulled from the cold Pacific waters. But the questions surrounding her death still cling to her legacy like a fog that refuses to lift. In the years since, careers have continued, reputations have been carefully maintained, and the passage of time has tried, unsuccessfully, to bury a story that never stopped haunting Hollywood. But even as the names fade and the headlines grow fewer, one unshakable truth remains. Natalie didn't deserve to die the way she did. And someone knows exactly what happened that night. The public has never let go. Documentaries, podcasts, best-selling biographies, and fan-led investigations continue to keep the case in the spotlight. The fact that no one has been charged, that no definitive conclusion has been drawn, is precisely why people refuse to move on. This wasn't just a tragic accident. It was a moment frozen in suspicion, a collision of fame, fear, jealousy, and silence. Natalie was not just another celebrity lost too soon. She was a woman who spent her life performing for the world, but whose final act may have been written by someone else entirely. Lana Wood, Natalie's younger sister, has remained her fiercest defender. Year after year, she's demanded justice, pushing investigators and the media to take another look. She believes her sister was killed, and that Robert Wagner knows far more than he's ever admitted. "I want the truth," Lana has said. Not revenge, just the truth. She didn't fall. She didn't go out there alone. Someone was with her. Her words echo the cries of so many who still believe the official narrative is a cover-up. Wagner, now in his 90s, has never been charged. He continues to deny any wrongdoing and maintains that he loved Natalie until the very end. But he has refused to cooperate with modern investigators. And to many, that silence speaks louder than any denial. "If you had nothing to hide," one investigator said off the record, "you wouldn't run from the questions. You'd answer them, especially if you claimed to love her." Christopher Walken, the third person on the yacht that night, has also kept mostly silent. In a rare interview, he said simply, "Only she knows what really happened." A statement that sounded like sorrow, or guilt, or both. And yet, the full truth remains frustratingly out of reach. If you're still watching, this story matters. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what you believe really happened to Natalie Wood. Your voice keeps her memory alive and may help push the truth closer to the surface. For Natalie's daughters, the mystery is more than historical, it's personal. They lost their mother to circumstances that still don't make sense, and the pain of that absence lingers. There are no answers, no apologies, no real closure. Just photos, stories, and the ache of what might have been. And while they've chosen to remain mostly private about the case, the shadow of that night is something they will carry forever. Natalie Wood deserved better. She deserved peace. She deserved the truth. And as more voices break their silence, as old lies unravel, and as a generation continues to ask the hard questions, one thing is becoming clear. The truth doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it builds slowly, quietly, until it can no longer be ignored. The Natalie Wood mystery may never be solved in the way we want, with a trial, a confession, or a dramatic reckoning. But piece by piece, the real story is being unearthed, and what's rising to the surface is disturbing. It reveals a culture of silence, the protection of powerful men, and a system that failed one of Hollywood's brightest stars. So now, the world watches and waits, less for justice, perhaps, and more for honesty. For someone, somewhere, to finally say what happened that night aboard Splendor. Because even after all this time, Natalie Wood's voice still echoes. And until the truth is spoken, she will never truly rest.